welcome to part 10 of my evidential research document in relation to CERN The Hadron Collider. In the last part, we were looking at connections through to the research of Julian Assange, or Hawkins, and we're just going to show a little bit more in relation to this. So actually searching for his name on Companies House on the left, you can see that one record links very quickly, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I just want to show it again because it is the importance of the ISIS connection. So you can see ISIS, loads of ISIS companies linking in very quickly, and one in particular I researched dissolved in 2023 as I'm exposing the fraud on the right, and it links to a company that links immediately to an address you can see on the left there, Griffin's Tavistock House South, Tavistock Square, London. Well, that links to the Flemings and the very important company CAPB Limited, because of the change in name on the 23rd of July 2001, the day before Larry Silverstein purchased the lease for the World Trade Center building, and it changed its name to CA Premier Banking, which stands for Cater Allen, which is the offshore private banking element of Abbey National or Santander. So ISIS is a very important word or acronym in relation to all of this and making a lot of the links. And you may know ISIS because of the Islamic State connection, just showing some of the research here, and the supposed terrorist activities, but it is clear that that is a mass deception, and it's actually the same organisations linking to the international governments, including the UK and US governments, that have been involved in all major terrorist incidents around the world through this fraud. You can see the group was founded in 1999, 2 years before the World Trade Center disaster. And Isis was an Egyptian goddess, which we're going to come to a little bit later, all of the Egyptian connections, but they are very relevant, but they're hidden, okay? They're not obvious connections, which suggests this is really likely to be the true group or bloodline behind everything that we're seeing. Further down in the research surrounding Julian Assange, coming in from another entry of Julian's original name, we find United Nations companies. Again, this is a company that's featured several times throughout the fraud. Coming in from that is a fraudulent company, this actual United Nations company, okay? Started with Swift Incorporations and Jordan's, the same company that started Exborn Manor. And then we find links to Welsh companies, the Nuffield Health Service Trust on the left companies, Commonwealth Parliamentary Associations, fraud all the way throughout. And they've panicked, and it looks like here they've actually crossed out somebody from Hampshire, a name all the way through the document, it appears, because they were worried about it. On the document, you have the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit, okay? So the ability to control the fraud through the broadcasting in relation to Parliament. That's not the first time that company has cropped up. And then we have a company of children and families across borders. Bearing in mind, we're talking about international child trafficking, linking into the fraud. And then we make a connection on the left via Charles Marshall to Liberty Living Liberty company that was in liquidation at the time of this document, even though it was started in 2002, not long the year after the World Trade Center disaster. That company features very, very closely to the research of Donald Trump. And then we hit Alliance and Leicester and Santander companies, and you can see the address on it, exactly the same address again, Griffin's Tavistock House, Tavistock Square, as CAPB Limited, the Fleming linked company. From there, you make connections via the children's company to the International Claims Bureau. Remember, the insurance collation of funds to funnel it elsewhere and steal from those funds. Insurance is a huge part of that. This is why the insurance policies are so expensive now, because they've wanted to get as much money as they can from these insurance pots to use it in this criminal network. So do not, unfortunately, nobody can now pay into this, all right? Otherwise, we're facilitating international crimes and our own demise through CERN, which was the ultimate end game for them. But they were going to increase suffering on humanity, I believe, and against the children. Leading up to that point is the International Claims Company, which then makes links to the McClellan Group, which is featured in the fraud. You can see it actually links to Nigel Leonard Blood, the same name on Stephen Hawking's document, company document, the London Law Agency's criminal fraudulent company, Hampton Trust, Friends, and then we hit religious establishments again on the right, the Friends of the Minister Church of St Thomas, Newport, Isle of Wight. Isle of Wight, remember, is important. It's where Deborah Fleming was the NHS Chief Executive for Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Dorset. We then have links to the RNLI, and the RNLI building is in Poole in Dorset, Royal National Lifeboat Institute. We even had, I remember, a police conference there one year, and it was quite funny actually, because one of the inspectors fell asleep at the table listening to the chief constable at the time. I think it was Martin Underhill, who's part of this fraud. I mean, all of the chief constables, police and crime commissioners are massively neck deep in this international fraud, and as we know, the Association of Chief Constables company itself is very significant in relation to all of this. And we're going to come to the Association of the Police and Crime Commissioners Association office a little bit later as well, because that is also very relevant, and they were introduced by Theresa May. So you have links to the RNLI, of course, a charitable company, so they launder money through it. Commonwealth organisations linking into the fraud. Association of Social Workers link now. Okay, now we're not far away, remember? There's over 5 million companies. I'm going back and forth, back into the same companies, looking at other directors within those companies. Everything's been centralised, everybody. All right? It's criminal, the whole lot, by a very small group of what appears to be a doomsday cult. All right? In a simplistic term, but we're going to come to it later. So the British Association of Social Workers. Okay, remember, we're talking about international child trafficking, and we've mentioned Save the Children earlier. Here it is, the same director that we're looking at here, links to Save the Children Fund, and it's criminal. It's not even registered legally, and it links to Waterloos and the Freemasons. And on the right, just an article confirming that Save the Children were being investigated for child trafficking, but that'll be a cover-up. So John Shipton, the father of now, I know this is coming away from CERN a little bit, but it is all very relevant. So John Shipton is the father of Julian Assange, or Julian Hawkins. And you can see on the left, the research in Companies House, John Charles Shipton with an address in Wimborne comes up. Okay, remember, this is where Deborah and John Fleming were living, the ones that initiated my removal from Exbourne Manor. It's also where the creator of the World Wide Web lived, that was created for CERN around the time. Okay, all relating to this. You can see they connect to Queen's Copse Management on the right. And here's Queen's Copse Management, and the address for that, when you go into it on the right there, immediately links to Exbourne Manor Freehold Limited via Napier Management on the right. And this is one of the organisations that Dennis Crilly, who I featured in one of the last videos, he's a shareholder within Exbourne Manor, or maybe his wife was, and they used him to try and convince me to ensure that we employed a new management company from the Association of Residential Management Agents, or ARMA, being the acronym for the new management agent, because they wanted to control the fraud, control me, probably silence me if I'd have remained around there. Okay, and the Association of Residential Management Agencies is linked very, very quickly to the Association of Chief Constables that we've been talking about. And within that company, the Queen's Copse, Christopher Batten. That is my wife's father's best friend, or one of his good friends, and is, I believe, a financial advisor. And I've been having conversations with him, okay, prior to knowing how deep this all was and that they were linked. And he was saying to me, well, Gary, I think there needs to be a nuclear war to stop all of what's going on, to reset the financial system, or words to that effect. Okay, I suspect that was a distraction, again, to deviate away from CERN. Okay, and the plan with CERN. So he resigned, you can see from this company on the right, as I'm continuing to expose the fraud in 2023, even though he was appointed in 2003. And within this company, with his name on it, it links to Southbourne Grove in Bournemouth. That's an address that links very quickly to the research surrounding Lisa's father, my wife's father, and into Exbourne Manor Freehold Limited that he is connected to. Within, now Christopher Batten then links on the right to Queen Elizabeth School, Wimborne, Minster, again, Wimborne, where the Flemings live. And there on the left, you can see the address, Queen Elizabeth School. And it dissolved in August 2022. Remember, this is as I'm progressing my investigation with Exbourne Manor Freehold Limited. And within that company, on the left-hand side, you can see Fiona Holmes. Fiona Holmes on the right links to Initio Learning Trust. And look who's a director for that, Deborah Fleming, the one that initiated my removal from Exbourne Manor. And on the right, just to confirm, so you can see I'm telling the truth. And everything I'm saying is supported by the verifiable evidence. Please check it all. You don't have to trust me. Go and see that it's true. Deborah Fleming links to Exbourne Manor Freehold Limited. You can see confirmed here. And there's my name on the left within the company. And I didn't resign. I was removed. Going back to the Queen Elizabeth Company here. On the right, you can see that David Sims links to Bournemouth School for Girls. Within Bournemouth Schools for Girls. On the right, you have Paul Fitzpatrick. Same surname as... I believe, as Chelsea Manning's friend, potentially a relative, potentially the same person. I can't remember the first name. And he links to Bournemouth School on the left, and Bournemouth School links on the right there to David Sidgwick, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. Okay, and when I was trying to escalate this to the relevant organisations, from Dorset Police to the Independent Office of Police Conduct to the Serious Fraud Office, and eventually to the government's organisation of the Home Office that oversees all constabularies, all police forces, they were insistent that the Association the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office deal with it, even though I'd already established a link to David Sidgwick back to Exbourne Manor and the international government fraud. So I knew at that point we're talking national, if not international government fraud. And coming in from Bournemouth School, you have Caroline Kellaway, which has featured in various videos throughout the fraud. And you can see multiple duplicate records they've created deliberately. But the research surrounding her links into the Masonic building at Branksome in Poole in Dorset, which is where my wife's father told me he plays squash with those individuals. And there's multiple links to the Freemasons regarding my wife's family. Remember, right back at the beginning of looking at this document, we looked at the company that Julian Assange worked for, the Suburban Public Access Network. We'll research from that. It was the largest, longest running free public access system in Australia for internet, okay, an internet provider. Remember, this now ties in, the cell towers ties in with CERN, and this is massively implicated in the threat against humanity. COVID and the vaccines, it's now overwhelming that is a front and a cover for the threat from the cell towers tying in with CERN, because it creates the same symptoms of COVID, okay, the radiation. And the research surrounding it very quickly on Companies House on the left-hand side, you can see when you search it, it brings up Bates Wells No. 2 Limited that had a previous name of Hull Open Public Access Network, making a reference to, obviously, internet provider. Well, that company, Bates Wells No. 2, links immediately to the case of Madeleine McCann. When you go and look at Madeleine's fund, leaving no stone unturned, okay, company, and you look on the incorporation document, and then it's not here, you can't quite read it, but you'll see it looking on the incorporation document. It links to BWB No. 2 Limited. Well, that's Bates, Wells and Braithwaite, okay? And as we've showed, that links massively to everything. It includes a link to Keir Starmer, to the Royal Association of Police Officers, to the defence being used by P. Diddy, okay? Even the lawyer that was representing, supposedly, Julian Assange, Jennifer Robinson, when you research her organisation, Doherty Street Chambers Services Limited, she links very quickly through to the Death Penalty Project Limited on the right here, and you can see that Keir Starmer was a director of that company, resigning at a key time in April 2020, around key moments linking in with the COVID inquiry, or the COVID scandal, shall we say. Now, remember, I suspect that is all, in fact, it's overwhelming that is all staged to hide the real threat from CERN and the cell towers, and the radiation link to the two, as well as a direct link that I'm going to show you in another video. And then a little bit more of this actually moving forward. You can see via the ear to the ground company, I think it was, okay, via one of the directors, it then links very quickly through the Access to Justice Foundation, linking into Queen Street Place, an address featured throughout the fraud, and on the incorporation document, Jordans and Sons Limited, links to PayPal, Citizens Advice Bureau, Solicitors Benevolent Association, the City of Westminster and Holborn Law Society, all very quickly connected, okay. We then find connections to the Friends of the Commonwealth Foundation, the Nationwide Foundation, and on the Nationwide Foundation, you're not going to be able to read it very well, we have Allen and Overy, and then one of the pages, multiple Fleming companies. All right, Fleming, the Fleming family again. And then you hit the Northern Rock, an association of charitable foundations, which also features in the fraud. Charity companies. And there's so much more evidence tying in with Donald Trump again via David Sorensen, linking into Julian Assange, and also the Hampstead Child Abuse Inquiry via a particular person that I was directed to as part of a misinformation, disinformation, distraction attempt against me, which didn't work. Eventually it didn't work. There's loads of evidence here, but let's go back to the CERN Hadron Collider document. It's given you a good idea of the importance and relevance of Julian Assange in relation to all of this. Here's just some of the screenshots of the documents we were just looking at. Now, this is very, very important, okay? Bearing in mind everything that we're talking about, already talking about links to Jeffrey Epstein through to international child trafficking, linking in very closely with JP Morgan and the Flemings, all tying back into CERN and a potential sinister plan to create a point of singularity or black hole. Well, here's an article. When I've searched, is Jeffrey Epstein linked to CERN? It comes up with this, and it's from, importantly, April the 19th, 2012. Okay, this is less than 3 months before they discovered the Higgs boson or God particle at CERN. And it says, science activist Jeffrey Epstein holds a conference of Nobel laureates to define gravity. Further down, 21 renowned physicists, including 3 Nobel laureates, recently met on St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands to determine what the consensus is, if any, for defining gravity. The conference was financed by science philanthropist Jeffrey Epstein, and we all know who he is, hopefully, and his foundation. It was organised by Lawrence Krauss, professor of physics at Arizona State University. The Nobel laureates included various people, including Stephen Hawking. All right, and other people from the CERN Hadron Collider project, you can see further down. And it says, understanding gravity is critical now, Krauss argues, because there's a lack of understanding on how to accommodate gravity and quantum mechanics. Indeed, conventional notions of gravity require little to no spatial energy for entities to be bound to the other, a sense of anti-gravity or vacuum. Now let this sink in. So Jeffrey Epstein held a meeting with Stephen Hawking on April 2012 about gravity and other people from CERN 3 months, less than 3 months before the Higgs boson particle was supposedly discovered by CERN, and the same year that the Mayan calendar supposedly ended, that may have signified the end of the world. And that theory surrounding 2012 and the end of the world included a black hole at the center of our galaxy. Now, remember what I've said. I suspect we are, and they know we are the center of the galaxy, if not more. And I suspect that's why we've got all of the lies and deception surrounding the moon landing, tying into the fraud, and the word NASA, one letter short of Satan, etc., tying in with Charles. Another article comes up when I ask that question. On the right here, you can see it, and on the left, we've gone into it, and it states, Jeffrey Epstein, CERN, other connections, starting to think the Epstein-Maxwell stuff goes way deeper. Both obviously CIA Mossad assets working for Rothschild. Rothschild created Royal Society, where Musk met CERN director. Musk visited Epstein, New York mansion, Rothschild, and Witch Abramovic Satan painting. Now, I can't verify what this person's saying, but when you look at the company's house records, it ties in with everything that is being said here. Now, I've already shown this screenshot, if I can scroll down, earlier in the video, the links here to the 4 companies from this article: CERN, Lucis, the United Nations, and the World Economic Forum. And remember, it showed an image of an apparent satanic ritual at the bottom there in 2016 by the Shiva statue outside of CERN. Shiva represents destruction and creation, or creation and destruction. Okay, a satanic ritual in 2016. We're going to come to that in a bit, and how I suspect that ties in with TikTok, the social media platform. So on the left, let's look at the important evidence now regarding, and the stuff that you can verify through the government's own registration system. Remember, this is where the truth is held, and anything else becomes supportive. Stephen Hawking's in Company's House, typing that in on Google brings up Stephen Hawking Limited on the right. This company was started in 2015. And on the incorporation document that you can find in the filing history, the London Law Agency, the second most important company in the fraud, that's now dissolved since I've exposed it, and the company that started in 1967, the year after the Church of Satan. Within that company, on the right, you can see Stephen Hawking's name, just to confirm he is there. Professor Stephen William Hawking. Same date of birth, etc. He's also linked on the left to a company called Space Time Publications. Going into that company, it was started in 1985, the same year that Swift Incorporations Limited, which pretty much goes hand in hand with Jordan's Limited, and are the 2 companies on Export Manor Freehold Limited, was first incorporated, 1985. That then dissolved in, I think it was November 2023, as I was exposing it. So on the incorporation document for this space-time company, you have the name that features very prominently linking into the international child trafficking: Nigel Leonard Blood. Remember, we're talking about the blood being taken from children in relation to all of this. That's a name making the link, not a company, a name within that company. On the bottom of the document, the London Law Agency. On the left, he's also linked to Cosmic Horizons Limited. Okay, now remember, part of a black hole is called the event horizon. We're going to come to that in a minute. That is the point of no return, where light, according to the research, light cannot escape from the point of horizon into that point of singularity. On the right, going into that company, has an address in Cambridge. It was founded, incorporated in October 2012, the same year that the Higgs boson particle was created or discovered. 2 months before the Mayan calendar was supposedly ending. That was in, I think it was 21st of December 2012. And look when it dissolved, as I'm exposing the fraud, in February 2023. Within that company, Cosmic Horizons, on the left, you can see Winifred Godwin. And they link to a company on the right, the Winter Comfort for the Homeless, or Winter Comfort for the Homeless. You'll see how significant this company is. Now, bearing in mind, they love to hide, okay, under company names. You know, Winter Comfort for the Homeless is not something you generally look into, is it? As part of an international fraud linking into the point of singularity to end the time and the universe itself. Well, this was incorporated in May 1991. And the Gulf War ended in February 1991 on the left. Okay, remember, this is the same year Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's also 1989, remember, is when the World Wide Web was created for CERN, okay, as a result of CERN. And the creator for the World Wide Web links to Dorset significantly and back into Export Manor Freehold Limited and links to the Flemings, okay, via it. So we have the Gulf War here. Remember, the electronic register for the company's house, how they've done this fraud, was then initiated in 1992. On the right, on the incorporation document for this Winter Comfort company, Winter Comfort for the homeless, you have Ellen McCool Fleming. My eyes are terrible. Okay, so you have a Fleming name linked to an address of Artillery Lane in Bishopsgate. Further down on the document, and please verify this, we have a link to a former UN employer, United Nations employee. You can see the name at the top there. And an address of Cambridge again. We also have a Rothschild, Pauline Rothschild, according to this, in Cambridge. And another Rothschild, Henry William Rothschild, of an address in Cambridge. Further in on the document, we have a link to a retired criminologist and social worker, Harriet Wilson, of King's Road in Cambridge. So we have a link to criminology and child connections, or the care service for the children, okay, on this document. We also have further down a reverend, a vicar in Cambridge. This is on page 8 of the document. Go and verify it. We also have a dean of Trinity Hall in Cambridge. This is, remember, in Cambridge University, Trinity Hall, that's where Stephen Hawking studied. And he's the Reverend Charles Eliot. Incredibly important, okay? Now we're going to move forward. Going into this company on the left, you can see Joanne Crellin on the left, and she links to, on the right there, the 999 Club and Lady Florence Trust. So we now have a link to 999. We all know is the emergency number, isn't it? Okay, for the police and other emergency services. If you turn it upside down, 666 666. What's the number in America? 9/11. What was the date of the World Trade Center disaster? 9/11. Now, you've also got the Lady Florence Trust in there. That, I would suggest, represents Lady Florence Nightingale. Now, this in itself is very important, because the evidence that I've found links that name in companies to the threat from directed energy in the cell towers, okay, in the link, and therefore that will link to CERN. Now, what did they call the hospitals over the COVID period in the United Kingdom? The 7 big hospitals that never got used, the Nightingale hospitals. They named after Florence Nightingale. On the right, you can see that this company was incorporated in June 2001, a month before Larry Silverstein purchased the lease for the World Trade Center building. And it changed its name not long after the World Trade Center disaster in April 2002. On the left, within the 999 company, Owen Beament connects on the right to the Russian Orthodox Drug Rehabilitation Center. So we now have a link to Russia immediately from this. We're so close, remember, from Stephen Hawking's and creating, it would seem, a black hole, the attempt to create a black hole, which could end everything. Let's face it, if it's true. On the left, the Russian Orthodox Drug Rehabilitation Company. It links to the fraud via Allen and Overy on its incorporation document at the bottom. It also appears to have been altered on the address here. You can see they've taken out a name that's gone over the lines, and there's a banker linked to this company. You can see on the right here, the banker being Patrick Hugh Palmer, according to this, of an address in London. All right, now remember, the banks are all implicated in this, all of them. On the left, Georgie Grieg links to various, and I've just put some of them, media companies, Independent Print Limited, Evening Standard at the bottom. These have already been linked to the international fraud. All mainstream media and social media companies have been centralized and are linked to this international government fraud. Okay, the control of information to deceive humanity and fulfill their agenda. On the left, they're also connected. Now let this sink in how important this is. Reza Gorbachev Foundation. Okay. And I wasn't too sure. Obviously, I knew the surname. I didn't know Reza. And we're going to come to that in a minute. So it dissolved in December 2015, started in 2006. And Reza Gorbachev was the wife of Mikhail Gorbachev, okay, the former president or prime minister. Is it president or prime minister? Of the Soviet Union before it changed to Russia. All right, now remember, we've already found links to the Russian government via the Hackler Advisory Company, various other Russian links into this international government fraud. Within the UK Parliament, you've got a former KGB Russian agent, according to the research. Okay, now she supposedly died in 1999, having been born in 1932, the same year as the Ian Fleming Co-Limited Company that appears to change its name the day before Larry Silverstein purchased the lease for the World Trade Center. So she was the husband. But she's also a Russian activist and philanthropist, and the wife of Mikhail Gorbachev. She has links to Ukraine. Remember, I've already showed previously there's links to the Russian government and Ukraine and the Flemings, all as a deception against humanity. So all of these conflicts or risks of conflicts that we're seeing, it's all a theatre and a show, and it appears as though it's all to hide what they're planning in relation to CERN. Oh, just at the bottom here. See, she married Mikhail Gorbachev in September 1953. Remember, we were looking at 1953 as being a specific date of relevance. It's when the Queen was coronated. It's the year that the MK Ultra program started, according to the research. And other important factors already mentioned. On the 1st of June 1990, the year of the Gulf War, and a year after the creation of the World Wide Web for CERN, Gorbachev accompanied US First Lady Barbara Bush to Wellesley College in Massachusetts. Both women spoke before the graduating class during the commencement service, touching on the role of women in modern society. And there was big media coverage there. The events of the Soviet coup of 1991, remember, important year, end of Gulf War, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and also leading into the electronic register creation of Companies House. That was when the Soviet coup was, which attempted to depose her husband from power, left a lasting scar on Gorbachev, who suffered a minor stroke on the final day. The political turmoil that followed pushed the Gorbachevs into the shadows. It says also in 1989, following a personal address from Professor, I'm not going to pronounce that name, and others, Gorbachev contributed $100,000 to charity International Association of Hematologists of the World for Children. This and further donations raised by both of the Gorbachevs helped to buy equipment for blood banks and to train Russian doctors. So we have the blood taken from children linking into the Gorbachevs here. It appears from this evidence. Also within the Reza Gorbachev company on the left, we have Alexandra Lebedev. On the right, research surrounding him says that he was obviously a Russian, born in 1959. He is a Russian businessman and has been referred to as one of the Russian oligarchs. Until 1992, the same year as the electronic register starting to be initiated for Companies House, he was an officer in the first chief directorate, in brackets, foreign intelligence of the Soviet Union's KGB, and later one of the KGB's successor agencies, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. In May 2022, on the left here, Lebedev was put on Canada's sanctions list following the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, I suspect the release or the inquiry surrounding this fraud triggered the invasion by Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, okay, to try and hide all of the evidence and distance everybody from all of this, but also enable them to trigger falsified biblical prophecies that we then saw with Israel later down the line. There's a picture. I haven't shown the picture, but above there you can see Lebedev with President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, on the 7th of May 2002, not long after the World Trade Center disaster. Reading further down, upon leaving the Russian intelligence community, Lebedev set up his first company, the Russian Investment Finance Company. In 1995, this bought the National Reserve Bank, a small Russian bank which was in trouble at the time. The bank subsequently grew rapidly to become one of Russia's largest banks. Among the bank's assets were, among other companies, the Ilyushin Finance Company that we're going to come to in a minute. Now, 1995, it's when the Hakluyt Advisory Company was founded. That's a really important company on the Royal Foundation, the Prince and Princess of Wales Company Incorporation document. Go and look at page 40. It's on there, and it is now dissolved since I've been exposed it, linking the Flemings, the royal family, to the Russian government, back into Ukraine via the Flemings, the international corruption and fraud tying in with BlackRock, and it all now ties in and points towards CERN being their main agenda in all of this, due to the links through to the satanic connection and the blood taken from children. Pure evil, but we're gonna talk about that a bit later. So let's have a look at, first of all, just to confirm, under his name, you have the National Reserve Bank that was just mentioned. But you also have here research that I've conducted on the Ilyushin, I don't know how you pronounce that, Ilyushin Foundation, possibly. So let's look at this company. On the left, the overview. It started in dissolved in 2017. It was created in 2006. On the incorporation document, we have a link to Geneva in Switzerland. And remember, Switzerland is a massive part of this. It appears to be where they are based. And Switzerland was made a neutral country back in 1815 as part of what all of this is about. Okay, Switzerland's a huge part in everything in relation to this. And even Anthony Roberts, the acting chairman for Companies House, was going regularly to Switzerland. Okay, I know that because we had discussions around it before I even knew about any of this, because I used to go to Switzerland with my family camping as well as other places in Europe, and Anthony Roberts used to go to Switzerland a lot. As I continued the exposure, he changed his picture on his Facebook, removing the picture of Switzerland. On the right, you have Alistair Cunningham within the Ilyushin Company. And he links to a company on the right of Vitae Biotech Limited. Within that company on the left, Catherine Hickson links to the London Law Services Limited. Okay, now the London Law Services always pretty much goes hand in hand with the London Law Agency that we've been talking about. And here you can see the London Law Agency on the right. And the London Law Services Limited was created the same year that the World Wide Web was founded, 1989. And remember, the creator is linked to Exborn Manor Freehold Limited. Within that company, the London Law Agency, John Cowdery connects to, on the right, nearly 3,000 companies, including electronicformations.co.uk Limited. So that will be a company creation company on Companies House. On the left, he also links to Paul Sports Limited. This is featured in the previous research. He was a director for one day on the 21st of February 2014. On the right, within Paul Sports, Edmund Mitchell connects to various companies, but on the right, Black Label Events Paul Limited. Now, this is already shown on my research surrounding the rapid response teams, okay, and ties in very quickly through the research with Lisa's uncle, okay, Adrian Windsor, who was a financial advisor. Now, still is, and he also owns the Bermuda Pub, okay, joint owns it. The Bermuda Pub is in Ashley Cross in Bournemouth, in Poole actually it comes under, and you can see the address here is Sandbanks in Dorset, the fourth most expensive place to live in the world according to the research I've seen, and this is where poor Neil Monroe, one of my former colleagues, was found washed up after supposedly jumping from a yacht in Poole Harbour. That's all connected into this international government fraud from the previous research. You can see the address for Paul Label Events Limited. Here is an address that's featured in other places in the CERN Hadron Collider document, the Old Town Hall, 71 Christchurch Road in Ringwood. It's also featured in other areas of the fraud. Within the Black Label Company on the right, Brenda Mitchell connects to Sandbank Sports Stadium. Just showing some connections here. And also Sand Castles Pool Management Co. Limited. Within that company, you have Fox's Property Management of 6 Paul Hill in Bournemouth. Remember, this address has featured multiple times on this document and throughout all of the research. This company, Fox's Property Management Limited, links to the research of Ghislaine Maxwell and to the special advisor for the last few UK Prime Ministers. That special advisor is Douglas Dougie Smith, who started up Fever sex parties, has been arrested for threats to kill, and according to Nadine Dorries, practices the dark arts. I think we now know what this is all about. Remember, he's been advising the last few Prime Ministers. He's Scottish. He's very likely a Scottish Rite high-level Freemason. On the right, we have Richard Howling within the Sandcastle Company, and they link to Dorset Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which I've already linked to before. I think it's fraudulent. Okay, and Chambers of Commerce are all the way through the fraud, just like the Citizens Advice Bureaus. Okay, it's one of those types of organisations that they've had to infiltrate and use as part of this fraud. And on the incorporation document for Sandcastles is Michael John Hope. Again, a name that links throughout the fraud on the incorporation documents, and that is the London Law Agency. Again, second most important company in the fraud, now dissolved. Within the Sandcastle Company on the left, DD Management Company, on the links to Richmond House Southbourne Management Company Limited. Southbourne is very close to Exbourne Manor. And you can see it has an address of Castle Lane West. That address, 78, features throughout the fraud, various points. And within the Richmond House Southbourne Management Company on the left, you can see they have the address here as the registered office of Unit 8, the Old Pottery, Manor Way, Verwood, in England. And within the people record, you'll see Property Solutions Southern Limited, okay, with no brackets around Southern. Property Solutions Southern Limited. And when you go into the Richmond Company, we have a link to Caroline Kellaway. Remember, we've already spoken about that in the last part in relation to the links to Julian Assange or Julian Hawking. Okay, part of, it seems, a doomsday cult with all of this, everybody. Within Exbourne Manor, on the right, it has exactly the same address. The company I was removed from for refusing to file forged bank documents. Unit 8, the Old Pottery, Manor Verwood. When you go into the people record, Property Solutions Southern, in brackets Southern though, okay, so they've now, it looks like, changed the name or created another company, probably as part of all of this. You can see the same address, Unit 8, Old Pottery Road, Manor Way, Verwood, England. On the right, going back into the Razor Gorbachev Company, you have another Lebedev name connected into, on the right here, the Pies Pub Limited. Pies, P-I-E. Could that stand for the Paedophile Information Exchange? Because I'm finding many PIE companies linking throughout this. And we know the Paedophile Information Exchange was linked to the National Council for Civil Liberties, which ties to the World Trade Center disaster. On the left, within the Pies Company, Sir Ian McKellen. If you don't know who he is, he's a Hollywood linking into he's an actor linking into Hollywood, sorry. You can see a bit of research from him here. And remember, Hollywood's a huge part of all of this, everybody. Okay, the Flemings are linked to it via Ian Fleming in the James Bond movies. He was born in 1939, and you can see here in 1991, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II. Again, 1991. One of his companies here, Namango Productions LLP. This is where Ian McKellen links to. You have Sir Patrick Stewart in there, another Hollywood actor. Ian McKellen is also connected to the Royal Theatrical Support Trust and the Royal National Theatre that's featured in the fraud multiple times. On the left, the 999 company, going back into it, you can see here, and they were appointed, okay, via, this director was appointed in September 2001, the World Trade Center disaster month, okay, a few days before it. On the right, they are linked to the St Paul's Girls' School. Within the St Paul's Girls' School on the left, Zayna Brain connects to RAC Limited. And not just one RAC company, RAC Finance at the bottom. Many of you will be aware that they're linked to the Breakdown company. Well, why is RAC so important? Well, that's one of the companies on this Jewish company, which I suspect is not they're not Jewish, I believe. The company is the Jewish Community Centre UK. This is the same company that I've showed multiple times because it's got the Charles Darwin Trust Company on it, which links, therefore, to the theory of evolution. The Charles Darwin Trust Company also links to the research that I'm going to be producing, hopefully, tying in with the cloning, okay, of humans. Remember Dolly the sheep? Okay, the research links to the Charles Darwin Trust. And on the document, and it's a very important document because only one of the directors has an address in Geneva, the rest are in London. It also has connections to the NHS. You can see here all of these other companies on it, linking to the royal family. So looking down from the top here, you have automotive skills, so it's links to the car, but you have car industry. You're the United Synagogue Pension Trustee, interesting. Further down here, Quick Fit, Israel Promotions, Lex Motor Company. Well, Lex is part of the Bank of Scotland group, the Lloyds Bank group, and I acquired forged Lloyds Bank documents, remember, via Exborn Manor. Sorry, I accidentally moved the screen. And you'll see on here various RAC companies. You can see there in the middle of the screen almost RAC Pension Trustees. You also further down have Royal Connections, the Princess Royal Trust for Carers. Okay, bearing in mind we're talking about child trafficking through the care sector. We then have connections, Jewish Community, RAC Holdings again, Morgan Brown Company, RAC towards the bottom there, RAC PLC, and then another Royal Automobile Company there above it, and at the very bottom, Hampstead Theatre Limited. Well, that links to the research of the Hampstead Child Abuse Inquiry, where 2 children were making very stark allegations against their father, Ricky Dearman, of not only abuse and rape against them in a church and in a school, but also the murder of babies, all linking in. When I've researched Ricky Dearman, it goes back into all of the same companies, everybody. All right, all linking into this international government fraud, the same companies. Come back for the next part, please.